This is Brain Break with Randy. I'm grateful to be with you. I wanted to visit with you a little bit about some stories from my life. If you've listened to an introduction about myself, I spent roughly 40 years as an itinerant salesman, traveling from place to place, solving problems. At one point, when I lived in El Paso, I had a good customer in a town north of us in Alamogordo, and they I had made an appointment to see them, so I showed up the next morning, and the guy I had uh, gone to see told me he had been fired. They told me he had been fired, and I was shocked because he was their best employee, even though he wasn't very high ranking. He was definitely a keeper, and I had his cell phone and his home phone number. We'd worked together enough that we shared that information with each other. And so I called to see what was going on. And he said, "Well, they fired me." I said, "Why did they fire you? What's going on? You're not the kind of guy that gets fired." And he said, "Well, my son's got cancer." I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm taking him to El Paso for treatment at the hospital. And I asked for the day off. But somebody, out of the goodness of their heart, showed me his present and clocked in for me and clocked out for me that day. And I never was at work. And so they're telling me I was the dishonest one, and that even though I wasn't at work, I wanted to get paid for that day." And I said, "Well, that's crazy." He says, "Yeah, I know." So I went back to the plant, talked to the manager. He didn't seem to care much. And so I went downtown to talk to I can't remember how it started. I think I talked to the public works director, and then from there to the city manager and even the mayor. And said, "This guy is not that guy. He wouldn't do that kind of thing. I know him." And he had an appointment to meet with me today, and yet I know he was going to be gone yesterday. He told me he was coming to El Paso, and that's why we didn't meet here at Alamogordo. And so they listened to me. I went to the plant, tried to explain the things this guy and I were going to work on, the project. Nobody was interested. They were just employees, not thinkers. And I stayed in touch with him through this process, though, and he asked me to write him a letter explaining my side of it, what I understood, and I did all that and had it typed up by a local secretary. This is before we had computers. And anyway, I can't remember at which time, thinking about it, we probably didn't even have cell phones at that time. Anyway, make a long story short, they did a full investigation and found out that he didn't clock himself in and out, but somebody else did. Because of myself and his story, they put a camera in discreetly by the time clock, and they watched one person come in and clock four or five people in and out, and then they'd go about their day. But only that one person was the one doing all of the work, and they caught them. They fired everybody, rehired the guy that they said they were letting go, and it was just kind of a sad deal. The They went out of their way to find good people, but sometimes when you're in a small community like that, it takes time to build good people. And that's what happened in this case. They ended up having some very good people. They brought in a company to manage them. And that's a sad story, too, because one of the company they brought in, they had a young man that was very sure of himself. He was the safety director. Um, and they had a tank that they had to decommission and then cut up and haul off to the landfill. In the decommissioning process, he gave himself permission to go inside this tank, which was a confined space. And he didn't have anybody to back him up. He didn't feel it was necessary, but it was, because he went in and was overcome with fumes and he passed away. Um, and I was really sad because he was a good guy too, somebody I really enjoyed working with. In my career, I've seen a lot of useless death like that. One other experience, I was at a paper mill, and in that I was running a test in the paper mill, and this test work lasted for a week, and I was literally on site, out of town, living in a hotel, and coming back roughly every 4 to 6 hours and running tests and seeing how good our chemistry was working versus their current chemistry. And on the night shift, there was an employee who used to push by me. He was taking his samples at the same time, and while I would have to put on a safety belt and harness and then hook myself to a safety harness to keep from being able to fall in if I were to get in such a position where I would lose my balance and fall in. This man uh, would push by me, and he he did that several times, and I I never said anything to him. He was an employee. I was just a contractor looking to get some business, but I just stayed out of his way because to me he wasn't wearing safety equipment, wasn't even wearing a hard hat, and I had to wear all this equipment that they told me about. I had to buy some of it, especially for working on their site in this position. And then I went back to my hotel, slept a few hours, showered, shaved. Back then, I actually shaved. And I got up and went and bought a couple dozen donuts. And I get out and I walk up to the mill, and there's a man in a suit standing there. And that doesn't make any sense to me because paper mills are dirty places and people don't wear suits. And this gentleman said, "Well, the mill's closed." And I said, "Well, I brought donuts for the employees." He said, "There aren't any employees left here except a few in the office." And I said, "Well, who are you?" And he told me he was with OSHA and that there had been a death. So I walked into the office, and after giving him one box for his coworkers and gave the other box to the few people that were left in the office, and they wouldn't tell me what had happened. Well, come to find out, the same gentleman had fallen in to the chopper taking a sample, and that's where they would put uh, recycled paper and cardboard, and it would shred everything up into fine pieces so they could make paper. And this man, the reason they found him is this chopper had been stopped by his forehead, the strongest bone in his body. And when they discovered that, and the rest of him was gone, uh, that's why the plant was shut down. And so I learned from that and many other experiences in my life that being careful around equipment was of the utmost priority and importance. And also, you did your work and you stayed out of other people's way. You never took credit for someone else's work, nor did you ever clock someone in if they weren't there. They had to do that on their own. It was an interesting experience working all those years, and those are just three quick stories from my life. But I learned to be very careful, and I learned to be safe, and I also learned to work really hard and to be honest and to take care of my customers and make sure that every single customer of mine knew that they were the most important customer I had when I was working with them. And I tried to do that, and I think they would agree with you or with me on that. So let me wish you a good night. I hope you've enjoyed Brain Break with Randy. Um, we'll get Keith back one of these days. And in the meantime, I invite you to join me again for another episode and relax and recharge. Thank you.